learning and academic cognition and all of the stuff you're doing here. So I decided it might be a good idea to take one side of one sheet of paper and put on it everything I could fit about what is actually known about how to study for a course. And this is not something I made up. It's not something that I think is a good idea. It's been researched a lot, and it actually works. First thing, kind of the common sense thing was try to figure out what's the best way to present material, what are the best things for a teacher to do, what should teachers never do, is it better to use PowerPoints or discussion or lectures or that kind of stuff. It doesn't matter. Amazingly, one teaching technique really overall does not work any better than any other technique. I use PowerPoint's integrity because they're convenient, but I could just as well do old-style pure lecture and notes, and people will learn just as much. They may not like it as much, but in terms of learning and understanding and memory, it really doesn't matter what I do. However, what has been found to matter a lot is what you do when you're studying, the way you think. There are ways to think and other ways to think, and those make a huge difference in how easy it is to remember material, and how easy it is to understand material, and how easy it is to remember it on a test. That's what I've written down here. First thing, most important thing, is that you can memorize anything if you have a lot of time on your hands and a high tolerance for pain. But that is making it as hard on yourself as you possibly can. That's the hardest way to get anything into memory, and the least effective if you want to when you want to go learn it later. You can do it with anything, but it's the hardest way to do it. The best way to do it is to understand the material. To think about material, say in a textbook, to think about material while you're reading it, to understand it, to see how everything is related to everything else. And if you do that successfully, you will have to do very little memorizing. The memory will just take care of you. It's been found that the remembering kind of takes care of itself if you concentrate on understanding it. Because if you understand it, you understand how everything is related to everything else. All you have to do is remember one thing, and it will remind you of everything else. So now there are some things that you just got to memorize, like the list of cranial nerves or the vocabulary in a language you don't know or something like that. There's nothing to do except memorize it. But most academic courses really don't have a lot of stuff that you have to memorize. Most of them have their own inherent structure. And if you understand the structure, if you understand the subject, if you spend your time understanding the subject instead of trying to memorize it, it'll take a lot less time, and it'll be a lot more effective in terms of remembering it. Besides which, you understand it, which is by itself a good thing. But that theme is all through memory research and cognitive research on this kind of information. So, what this is, there have been a couple of specific techniques. There have been a lot of techniques to stimulate you into understanding it, make you do things that will help you understand, rather than do things that will help you memorize. And what I tell you about on this sheet is the one that's been studied the most, and it really works. It's not me sitting down and saying what I think you ought to do. The whole method has been tested, the components of the method have been tested, and for most people it really works. If, on the other hand, you're already getting A's, forget about this. Who this really helps is C students who ought to be getting A's or B's, and they don't really realize why they're not. It's almost always the way you're thinking about it or the way you're going about it, what you're trying to do. If you're already getting A's, keep doing that. You've already got your method that will work. This is just a suggestion. If what you're doing does not work out for you as well as you would hope it would, as well as you hope it would. This method is called. This method is sometimes known as the SQ3R method. Has anybody ever heard of that?
Yeah.
It's because it has been so thoroughly tested by psychologists. It's in the first chapter of a lot of psychology books, not just on cognition. But we'll go through it quickly. But the whole point to it is to get different ways to get you to think about the material at different levels. There's nothing in here about memorizing. That'll take care of itself. It's to get you to think of it at different levels, and the remembering it is just a byproduct of it. First thing, the SQ3R. I'm always a little nervous about slick little titles, but this one has a purpose. It's so you can remember what the steps are. Okay. First step is survey, which means when you sit down to study something, especially a book, don't try to study it in detail, not at first. Leaf through it. Look over the whole section that you're going to have to learn, and see what you're up against. See what it is that you're going to have to do. Again, that's a way to get you to think about it, to approach it at a broad level and think about what you're going to have to be dealing with. During the survey part and after the survey part comes Q, which is question. Ask yourself questions about it. It doesn't matter what the questions are. The point is to be thinking about it. Is this something I'm interested in? Is this something I'm not going to find very interesting, but I need to be in this course to graduate? It doesn't matter what. You just think something. Think about it. Why is this person telling me about this? Why is he ordering the material in this way? What's he trying to accomplish by this type of explanation of it? Again, the point isn't so much what questions you're asking, but that you're thinking about it at another level. Then only now do you do the serious reading, where you start reading it in detail. When you're doing the reading, read it closely. None of this up to this point, has been reading it closely in detail. But when you get to the reading part, do it closely and in detail. But think about it. It's not like you're reading a novel, but it's also not like you're memorizing a list of words either. You're reading it closely, but you're asking yourself questions about it. Again, do I understand this paragraph? These two paragraphs sound exactly the same to me. Why did he say this twice? Well, you can bet he didn't say it twice, that there's some difference between those two paragraphs, and if you don't see it, you're not understanding it, so you got to go back and compare them more closely. What is the purpose of this graph? I don't see any reason to have put this graph there. If it's there, there's a reason for it, and again, be asking yourself why he did this. Why is he saying it like this? Why is he using this kind of explanation? Now you're thinking about it, but you're thinking about it at a level of detail. So we've got it at a very broad level, a little closer level, and now a detailed level. Next step is review. That's the second R of the three R's. Go back over it again. Don't do underlining when you're reading. That's been found to be pretty much useless. Although it seems like ought to work so well. In actual tests of it, it doesn't. Nobody knew that when I was in college, so I spent 4 years underlining everything in detail. But that just has turned out not to be a very good method. Probably because it tends to focus more on memorizing than on understanding. But whatever the reason, it does not work all that well. Instead, read it closely. Then after you read it, go back and review the whole thing. You don't have to, when you're reviewing it, you don't have to read it again in detail, but just remind yourself about what it was you read. Just, oh yeah, I remember saying that. Yeah, I remember that, and go over it at that level. Finally, when you're done, I didn't put the third R up here, which is reflect. Close it and think about it. Did I get anything out of this at all? Did this clarify anything for me? Do I understand anything that I didn't understand before I read it? What is the point he's trying to make? Did he make the point? Did he get the point across clearly? Again, it's not so much what you think as it is that you're thinking about it. Was there anything you didn't understand? I just didn't get that part. There is nothing in this book I'm going to assign that I don't think everybody in here can't get. Now, you may have trouble with it. That's not the same thing. It may be, by its nature, hard. But if it's so hard, I don't think you can get it, or it's so mathematical, I don't think you can get it. I've already taken it out. So, is there anything I didn't understand? Is there anything I need to look at again? Do you still not know what point he was trying to make in this one part of it? Anything. Just now you're just thinking about the big picture. And in doing so, you kind of refresh it in your mind, and that just makes it that much stronger, that much clearer. Most people, if they do this, will do much better than they do under whatever method they've been using before. Not everybody does, but most people do. But if you've already got a method that works, let me emphasize, it works. You don't need another method. You don't need this. But if you think you ought to be doing better than you are, give this a shot, because most people find it quite helpful, and there's been a lot of research on that. Just one thing I need to emphasize that I already mentioned this stuff. In the reading, don't miss anything. The reading is the one part where you look at it in detail, and don't skip any details. When somebody is trying to get a textbook published, there is a constant war between the author and the publisher. The author says, I've got to include these 3 graphs or this won't make any sense to anybody. The publisher says, those graphs are going to cost me $10,000 a piece. If you think I'm going to put them in this book, you're out of your mind. Okay, let's put 1 in. I don't think you need that. Please, nobody will understand it without this 1. And that goes on constantly when somebody's trying to write a book. What you see is what's left after that war between the author and the publisher. There is not a letter in there that doesn't serve some purpose. There is not a word in there that didn't come like pulling teeth in the argument between the author and the publisher. Now, you don't have to read every detail like that at every one of these levels, but there needs to be one where you don't miss anything, because everything is there for a purpose, and that's when you're reading it in detail. Try this. If it works for you, keep using it. If it doesn't, blow it off. I won't bring this up again. I won't ask you any questions about it or anything like that. It's just to help out if something has been found to work
for academic studying, and I'm just putting it here in case you might find it helpful. I put it up on Tegrity under additional content, so you can find it there. Other thing, have any questions about this? Here's our syllabus. We're actually just getting into topic 2 today, which is chapter 2 in the book. I was thinking the neuroscience part is a separate chapter, but it's not in this edition. But we're moving down the list here, and we'll get to exam 1 at the end of the month. Just a reminder of where that information is. That's also in there under additional content. And we still don't have Tegrity, so today or tomorrow, what I think I'm going to do is put up all of the PowerPoints we've covered as PowerPoint programs. You can download it and use it in your own. And I think I may also, since I don't think we have had, no, we haven't. We've never had a recording longer than 15 minutes. What I think I'll do is take some of the lectures from last year and just port them over. There won't be exactly the same thing I said this time, but it'll be close enough, and it'll be better than nothing if you need to go back and review, if you need to go back and look something up. I was hoping we wouldn't need to do that, but I think we better just to have it in case you need to check on something. Where we were, having just finished with neuroscience and getting on to our next subject of pattern recognition. What I might do here is refer back to some of those books I showed you the very first day of class and show you some quotes they have about pattern recognition to give you an idea of what it is we're getting into here. One of the books is How Doctors Think. And the guy who wrote that book points out, well, flesh and blood decision making, meaning real life decision making, pivots on what's called pattern recognition. In this case, well, as he says as a general principle, and this is true, it happens within seconds, actually often within fractions of seconds. You see something and realize what it is. Does not necessarily involve any conscious analysis, although it can. And in the case of a physician, you're sitting there in the examination room, and your doctor walks into the room and looks at you, and within a couple of seconds has come up with a preliminary diagnosis. The way you're sitting, whether your nose is red, all of the stimuli you provide the doctor will be recognized by an experienced doctor in a couple of seconds. Now, that diagnosis may change on more detailed information, but what we're looking at first is this pattern recognition process where you look at a pattern and almost immediately know what it is. And that's one of these things. It's an early level. It's very fast. It makes it kind of hard to study because it has to be mainly unconscious in order to be that fast. But it's really important, as several of these people who wrote these popular cognitive books point out at the very beginning of the book. This is another one. This is the link. Whether you're pounding out a Morse code message, you're trying to understand it, that's those little telegraph keys, dot, 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 dot. If you're a skilled telegrapher, you hear that pattern of dots and immediately realize the letters that they represent. Another example of pattern recognition. Predicting divorce. Whether you're a marriage counselor or whether you're just, oh boy, I've been through this one before. What you're doing is looking at aspects of something and recognizing the pattern, and you don't really even realize you're doing it. It's like it happens. You just know what this is. I've seen this before. And once again, this very beginning of the book, just like the How Doctors Think book, points out what a fundamental process pattern recognition is to cognition. Al Gore, in his book, The Assault on Reason, goes more to what we're going to start with, because it's what's been studied most by psychologists, and that's recognizing words. He points out correctly that there is no meaning up there on that screen. There is no meaning to letters. There is no meaning to words. There's black marks on a white screen. Any meaning to them comes about because you see those black marks on a white screen, and there is something in your memory that you match them to and supply the meaning yourself. Okay. Strung, that's a curve, that's a line with a curve, that's a big curve with a straight line next to it. It doesn't have no meaning to it. But you look at it, you match something about that pattern to something in your memory. Oh, that's the word strung, and here's what it means. But you supply all of that. That's what we're going to be trying to figure out how that works here. Why do you take that meaningless pattern and match it to in your memory? And what is the process you use for doing the matching? Again, as Gore says, anytime we read, we're supplying the meaning. The words out there don't mean anything at all. They're just scratches. And again, that's the first step in any kind of cognition. Okay, let's just start with an example at a really general level, and just think, we won't even get into any experiments at first. Let's just think logically about what we have to be doing to be looking at something and knowing what it is. We look at dog, we immediately know the idea is expressed. It's a mammal, comes in different sizes, has ears, waggly tail. All of that we know just because there is that straight line, curved line, a circle, incomplete circle with a little line in it. What has to be happening is that we take some aspect of those scratches, of those black scratches on the white, and match them to something in our memory. Doesn't mean anything itself. We find the meaning in ourselves and impose it on the pattern. Here's what we're going to try to find out. How do we find the meaning? We see a pattern that we recognize. What is that process of recognition? I can't ask you what you're doing because it's so fast it's got to be unconscious. So first of all, I've got to logically figure out what the possibilities are, and then I have to do experimental tests to decide to decide which one of those possibilities is really happening. This is too early to be asking this, but I'm going to anyway. Give me a hypothesis. What is it that we're matching? Let's just stay within the quotes, which is talking about the pattern dog. What might we be matching to what in our memories as part of the process of figuring out what that pattern of scratches represent? Now, whatever it is, got there by experience, but I'm asking what it is we're matching. It's too early for this question. We could be matching the individual letters. Oh, that's a D, and that circle is the letter O, and this other symbol, the open circle with a line through it, is G. We got D-O-G, dog. Oh, it's dog. It might be that the process of recognizing is recognizing the individual letters first and then putting the individual letters together into the word, and then we know what the word is. Now, we do that in thousandths of a second if that's what we're doing, but that's a possibility. One possibility is that we recognize the individual letters, and then once we know what the letters are, know what the word is. That's a theory. What else could we be doing? What's an alternative to that theory?
We take it as an image instead of individual letters.
We take it as an image. We take DOG as a whole and treat that as a unitary thing. Maybe for words that we know really well, we don't have to recognize the individual letters. Maybe we recognize the overall shape, kind of like it was a single letter. If it's a word that we're really familiar with, that we see all the time, we probably do that with really simple words like the. We probably don't do T-H-E-O, it's the. We treat the, because it's so common, we've learned that shape as though it's a single letter, as though it's a single unit. That's another possibility. What I'm trying to do is get you into psychologist mode here, where you first start asking, what is it that I've got to ask? What is it that I've got to look at? What is it that I've got to know? So let's start with the assumption that we recognize individual letters. That's a plausible hypothesis. But even then, let's say we recognize the individual letters and then match the individual letters to memories of words and know that it works that way. What is it about letters that we recognize? What is it? Okay, we don't recognize that one. What is it that we recognize? What is it about that symbol that we recognize to know that it's a letter D? Saying even if we recognize the individual letters first, that's just one step. The next question is, okay, how do we recognize individual letters? What is it that we match to something in our memory to know that that's the letter D?
Shape, the ratio of the state
overall
to the
shape is a good bit. Maybe we have memories of all the different possibilities for shapes, all the different variations on the letter D. We've got memories of all of the things that we've ever called letter D, and we match that against those possibilities and see if it matches the overall shape of what we call the letter D. That's actually one of two major hypotheses. What's the other one? This one is we recognize the whole shape by matching it against shapes in our memory. What's the other possibility?
What about Context, maybe?
Context helps us with recognizing shape. We'll get to that in a minute. But that still doesn't, context helps whatever the method is. So one thing we can do is recognize the overall shape and say, oh, that's the letter D, by matching it against shapes we have in our memory. What's the other possibility? These are hard questions, and I'm doing this on purpose, just to get you to think about it. Maybe we have maybe we have a list of characteristics that something has to have in order to be a D. Maybe there are specific features that if a symbol has it, we're going to call that a D. Maybe it's not the overall shape. Maybe we don't match an overall shape out there to overall shapes in our memory. Maybe we have a definition that something has to have certain features or certain characteristics before we'll call it a letter D. It's got to have there's a list of things it's got to have in order to qualify as a D. One is that it has to have a curve that bends in the middle, top to bottom. The other thing is that it has to have a vertical line covering the opening in that curve. If it has those two characteristics, it doesn't matter whatever else it has about the shape. But as long as it has those two defining characteristics, we're going to call it a D. Now, those are two totally different theories about what we do, but they are the two current theories. We take the overall shape and match it against some overall shapes in our memory, which is one perfectly good possibility. The other is we look at the characteristics of the shape and find a list of characteristics in our memory that defines that as a D. One is called template matching, which means overall shape. The other is called feature matching, which means we look for a list of characteristics. We're not trying to figure out what makes that look like a D, and we've already got two theories. Stuff is very complicated, even at its simplest level.
So theoretically, for I guess template matching, if somebody was only exposed to, let's say, that specific D for their whole life, and then they show them like calligraphy D, would they not be able to recognize it?
That's right. That in the strictest version of template matching, that would be true. It's got to be one that you've seen. But you've seen a lot of these. Okay, so we're on the question of how we recognize letters, which would seem so obvious, but it's not. It's one question is what it is that we match the visual pattern to. We know we've got the pattern out there. What is it in our heads that we match it to? Is it a shape or is it a list? And even then, even after we get it figured out, whether we match this to an overall shape in our memory or to a list of characteristics in our memory, how do we go about comparing? How do we go about the comparison process? What is it exactly that our brains do comparing this shape to the shape in our memory? Or what is it exactly that our brains do in making a list of the characteristics of this symbol and matching it against the list of characteristics in our memory? So this is just don't want to think about cognition too much. It overheats your brain. Even things that we take totally for granted that seem like they just happened, if you want to think of how they happen, it's never easy. It's never at all simple. If it were a simple, straightforward process, it would be easy to program a computer to do it. But it's incredibly difficult to program computers to recognize shapes, to recognize letters. we have some pretty good optical character recognition programs now where you can have your laptop scan something and do